Welcome to TheoTrade and happy holidays. This is Don Kaufman. Here we are. It's December 24th, 2016. Yes, we're recording here on Christmas Eve, giving you kind of a weekend update. So for the most part, we're in some holiday trade right now. And during this holiday trade this week, what did we really see? An extremely tight range in the S&P 500, largely doing, well, massively nothing throughout the course of the week. We expect, of course, some holiday trade next week. Yes, the markets are closed, of course, the Monday after the Christmas holiday. The following Monday as well, okay, which will be January 2nd, the markets will be closed. So we get 2 4-day weeks in a row. Again, I think this is it's a wonderful time to kind of review some of the major concepts, not just in options, but the market as a whole. And I'm going to do that in this weekend update here by taking a look at really probability, pricing, and what we also call probability of touching. Now, to do that, I'm going to take you on the thinkorswim trading application here. I'm going to close up this left side bar, but regardless of what trading application you may be on, if you were not on the thinkorswim application, I will show you precisely how to do this regardless, because of course, not every trading application defines probability. So one of the things that people miss in marketplaces is that, sure, the spiders, what are they? They're trading at 225.71. And most people start a lot of their analysis, if you will, right here in the chart, whether it's the spiders, whether it's Apple, whether it's, JP Morgan, Bank of America, whatever stock that you might be involved in, they start a huge amount of their analysis right here on the chart. I'm going to make an argument that if you're going to start some analysis when it comes to, kind of crafting a trade, yes, direction is incredibly important, but really probability, price, and the logic you use to build the trade are going to be drastically more important than, if you will, being right over time. When I say being right, well, we look over here and we spend all this time trying to assess, it's overbought, it's oversold. It's so overbought that it's actually oversold. Nevertheless, let me take you over to the trade tab here and let's examine a little bit about probability, price, and again, trade logic being of critical importance. Option markets, what they ultimately do, whether we open up an 11-day option, we can open up a 13-day option, all right? I mean, again, they've added now multiple expirations per week. Here on the spiders, there's even a Wednesday expiration, there's a Friday expiration. And even if you're not into options, bear with me for a moment, because again, this is about overall trade logic, and that again, it's going to be drastically over time more important than being right directionally. The options themselves put a price tag on risk to a future date. So when you start looking at, if you will, an 11-day option, and that's what this happens to be, an 11-day option or a 13-day option, you think about it, what the market's really trying to do in the marketplace. What is the marketplace? It's buyers and sellers, right? Ultimately creating a market here of the 225.50 puts, $1.23 to $1.26. This isn't some, market maker or some server. This is a marketplace. It's where somebody's willing to buy and where somebody is ultimately willing to sell, And the way I think about a marketplace, for instance, 13 days out, they're trying to kind of handicap risk, right? They're trying to figure out, well, I think risk is going to be X out 13 days from now. And there's a huge amount, based on these markets that you're capable of discerning. And one of the things that you can discern from markets is probability. So to begin with, again, even if you have limited or no experience in options, if you are extremely experienced, this is going to be a great recap, but I'm going to try to really kind of go a little deeper than maybe we've ever gone before. So for those of you that are brand new, hey, strap in. You're about to get thrown in the deep end of the pool over there, right? For those of you that are experienced, well, we're going to bend the limits of what you may or may not be aware of. So let's start with the idea of probability, On the thinkorswim trading application, it's pretty simple drop down. It's called probability in the money. And what this drop down ultimately says, this is an information layout here. It's the probability of an option being in the money by 1 penny or more come an expiration. So for the most part, the option price, forget about it for a second. Doesn't matter. Okay? You don't even have to be in an option trade to recognize what this says is there's approximately, and I'm going to round this, approximately a 35% chance that we're going to be above 227 13 days from now. Period. That's it. Don't look any further than that. Now, of course, everybody's going to question, is this right? Is it wrong? Okay. Well, we're going to talk about that as we move forward here. But a 35% chance. And the option itself doesn't mean you have to buy an option. You have to look at this probability, even if you're going to just trade the outright stock, okay? Or you're trading some futures contract, look at the probability. Why? It's telling you, because your target price on this stock might be somewhere around 227. Well, are you aware that you may only have a 35% chance of hitting that? I mean, how does that grab you? Now, I'll blank that for a second. If you do not have this column that says probability in the money, you can also use what's called delta. Okay? Delta is not the mathematical derived formula for probability, but it's a pretty good estimate. If you take a look, all right, on the screen over here, and you're looking at like, all right, well, he makes a good point. Here's delta of 0.30, and here's the probability in the money. It's basically 30%. Okay, they're roughly the same. For years, before there were calculations like probability in the money, right, before any of that, traders down on a floor in the 70s and 80s, they've been doing this stuff since the 70s and 80s. They were out there just looking at delta. And when you look at a 30 delta, all right, it means about a 30% chance of being in the money. In fact, whenever I ask a trader a question, if they want to give you an answer that they're not really sure, they go, all right, I'm about 80 delta. What are they 80 delta on? That means there's an 80% probability. That's it. That's all they're actually referencing. So, okay, this is the area that a lot of people might be familiar with. Now, that's probability in the money, but there's also a drop down for what we call probability out of the money, which gives you the probability of an option, okay, ultimately falling out of the money. That is, it's the probability of an option expiring worthless, but you do not have to use this specifically for options. You might look at this and say, all right, here we go, okay? What's the probability of the stock being below 228? There you go, 75%. See, nothing to do with the option, nothing to hide over here. You don't even have to trade the option. You just go, okay, there's about a 75% chance, all right? But that's a probability of expiring under 228 13 days from now, okay? That's really what the probability out of the money is, 75% chance, okay, that we're going to close under 228 13 days from now. Now, how do you do this if you don't have thinkorswim, the probability out of the money? Roughly speaking, come on, just look at the delta. If there's about a 26% probability of being in the money, right? Then, roughly speaking, there's going to be a what? About a 74% chance being out of the money. And again, you can use delta in lieu of probability. It's fine. Breathe deeply, all right? 26 delta, 26% chance in the money, conversely has a 74% chance of being out of the money. Now, how can you really start using this stuff? First of all, I don't want you guys to immediately start looking at this idea. Let's go back to probability in the money. I don't want you to look at this idea, for those of you that do trade options, and go, I would like a 90% probability. Listen to me. Just because you have a 90% probability, that doesn't mean you have a 90% chance of making money. That just means there's a 90% chance, okay? And I'll give you a great example here. This is a 90% chance of being above 210 13 days from now. That doesn't say there's a 90% chance of making money in here, okay? For you to make money, you need to 210, plus the $16. So you kind of scroll down, you're like, oh man, that's like 226. And all right, there's only a 44% chance of that happening. So don't get caught in probabilities thinking that's the probability I'm going to make money. It's not the probability of you being able to make money, okay? The next thing that I want to cover, and this is a big mistake in trading. You'll open up like the 27-day options here, and let's open up a bunch of strikes again. Let's open up like 30 strikes. People open up options and they will start to use this probability out of the money equation, okay? And they'll go, Look at this. Looky, looky, looky. I can go out here, done, and I can sell this option. And I can have a 90% probability. Right? You can sell that option for 25 cents right now. You can have a 90% probability. Now, this is an option trade. But there's a 90% chance that we're going to be below 233. Okay. Careful. Just because something has a high probability doesn't necessarily make it a good trade. Because behind the smoke and mirrors of high probability, like I know this'll actually rock your world, but a lot of people they'll go to some website and the website will say something like, I have a 90% track record. Okay. At this point, you have to realize if they have a 90% track record, a monkey can have a 90% track record. Literally, you can be right 90% of the time. Just because you're right 90% of the time doesn't mean you're going to make money. Think about that for a second. Why? What's going to happen to you the other 10% of the time? Oh, don't worry, you're going to find out. So never listen to when somebody says, yeah, don't worry, follow me. You're going to have 90% of the time, 90% of my trades, I make money. That means nothing. So what if 90% of the time? The other thing is all the time, I keep hearing people say you should always sell options. You should always sell options. I'm going to be forthright with you. I built my entire trading career around selling options premium. Literally, I built a trading career around selling options premium. That doesn't always make it right. It doesn't always make it right because if you don't understand the risks implied over here, just because you're right 90% of the time means nothing. Because the other 10% of the time, you're going to lose so much money, okay? You're not even going to know what happened to you. And you have to understand, first and foremost, what these probabilities, okay, really mean. Again, high probability doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make money in the long run, okay? 85% of the time, you're right. Well, 15% of the time, you feel the hammer, okay, smashing your hand doesn't exactly make it right. So you have to use the right trading logic along with probability. But in today's session, all I'm trying to do is introduce not only the concept of probability in the money, but probability out of the money. And instead of using probability in the money or out of the money, you could use delta to suffice. Right? So I'm opening up Pandora's box over here for some of you, but I don't want you to get misled and down the track of like, oh, this is always going to work if I'm always right 90% of the time. Okay? High probability might be very, very alluring, but it doesn't necessarily make money in the long run. The other thing that doesn't necessarily make money in the long run are blanket statements like selling options is always going to work. Okay? Again, both very, very dangerous concepts. Now, when I started this, I said, well, yeah, you look at a chart, you're trying to discern what's going to happen in the market, but it doesn't matter if you know what's going to happen in the market because the trade that you create, right, is going to be, again, it's drastically more important than the direction over time. And let me show you what that statement really means. So we're going to flip around to another underlying. And by the way, we could use really roughly any underlying. Twitter's been in play a lot lately. Bank of America's been in play, but whichever one you want. I'm just trying to pick a stock that's within reach of a lot of people just to trade the actual stock. And let's go ahead and let's open up these 27-day options. Now, again, let's assume in this example that you don't own the stock. You never had anything to do with the stock. You don't even know the stock, right? And you're not going to trade options. So from here, you don't own any stock. You haven't traded any options. You've looked at a setup, okay? Now, Bank of America, by the way, has had this explosive up move over here. It doesn't matter whether you want to be long or short. It's had an explosive up move. Let's say, for argument's sake, you think it's going to go higher. It's going to break out of a base that it just formed. Neither here nor there, okay? You're assessing a stock that you want to buy. And one of the most common things that people do is they'll use a trade, okay, with an OCO bracket order. All right, what that basically means, they'll go out there and they'll buy the stock, for instance, at like 22 bucks. They'll sell the stock if it moves up a couple bucks, sell the stock if it moves down a buck. But neither here nor there. I'm going to give you the logic of this right now. So let's say you go out, okay, and we purchase this stock right at roughly $22.60. okay? 2260. And you're going to go out and you're going to set a stop order. Okay, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to set a stop order. Lots of people use stop orders. Where are you going to set your stop order? Okay, so right now the stock is ultimately trading at what level? 2260, right? Maybe you want to make your stop a little bit tighter over here because, again, this thing's had a lot of volatility. You could put your stop, and this might be a little too tight, but maybe you put your stop at 22, okay? That, for instance, is where you put your stop order in there. And the answer I have to you right now is stop. Have you checked the probability of the stop being triggered? Again, I want to bring up this point of logic because probability isn't just standalone. Like looking at probabilities is really cool. Ooh, I have a 90% chance of success. Ooh, I have a 70% chance of doing this. That's all well and good. But you got to use it in a context that maybe you haven't thought of. You're going to place a stop order, and that stop order, okay, in the next 27 days. What's the probability of hitting 22? Well, there's an answer for that. Instead of using what's called probability out of the money, there's actually a drop down for what's called probability of touching. You're like, what's probability of touching? It's the probability anytime. Okay, probability of touching is what we call an anytime probability. It's the probability anytime in the next 27 days, okay, ultimately of us hitting or exceeding this particular level. So the probability of touching. If you're looking at the probability of touching, you're like, my trading application doesn't have probability of touching. Just take the delta and double it. Delta, delta, delta. What is it? Delta's 36 times 2. Pretty close, right? 75. So if your delta, roughly speaking, if your delta is roughly a 26, okay, like up here at the 21 halves, if your delta is 26, roughly speaking, you got between like 52 to 53% probability of touching. It's not perfect, but it's close enough. Like you don't have to have all this like, oh, I don't have the thinkorswim platform. It's okay. You could be on Interactive Brokers. You can be on a bunch of different platforms. I know not everybody lives in the US has an access to this trading application, which is fine with me. But for the stop order, don't you think it's important to realize that your trade might have a 75% chance of getting stopped out? Like legitimately, people don't look at this stuff. And when they do trades, nobody ever shows them, there might be a 75% chance that you're going to get stopped out of that trade. How does that suit you? Like, do you realize like people place stop orders blindly? They never look at probability of touching because they've never even traded options per se. So you don't necessarily have to trade the option. But in today's marketplace, I'm pretty sure the option data is of critical importance to you regardless of what you're doing because it's about the trade logic. You place a stop order that even has, for instance, a 56% probability. How do you make money in the long run? How do you make money, okay, when 75% of the time you're going to get stopped out? Now, maybe Bank of America doesn't do it for you, okay? Let's go look at like Twitter. I was looking at Twitter a moment ago and, let's go look at something like Twitter and say, well, I'm just going to do me a short-term trade. Well, okay, probability of touching can come into play here. Here's a stock that's trading at $16.50. You put your stop order in at $16. In the next 6 days, you still have a 52% chance of getting stopped out. Again, every time I do one of these videos, I want you to have something tangible, something you can take away that you haven't necessarily used before, and you don't have to be an options like super geek, but the option data is incredibly important because in the end, all right, you can be right in direction, you can be wrong in direction. But I'm going to tell you what you can't beat, okay? You could be right in direction, you could be wrong in direction, but you're never going to beat the mathematics of the marketplace. You're never going to beat the mathematics. And what that basically means is, if you keep putting yourself in position, and I'll give you again another example, you keep putting yourself in a position where you have a 60% chance, for example, of being stopped out over the next 27 days, how are you going to overcome that? You've just put yourself in a position that you're not even a coin flip away. Like this isn't even fair to put in a stop order. Yet, okay, think about how many people use stops. There's nothing wrong with the stop order as long as you understand what your probability of touching might be. You can even overcome using stop orders completely by using option trades, but that's better save for a different discussion, maybe a different day. Think about some of the things we've gone over here. Number one, the delta. It's the probability, okay? It's the probability being in the money by 1 penny or more. Okay. But if you do not have what's called probability of touching, let's just say that, I don't have probability. Okay. I don't have probability. So let's say you had no probability. Listen, the delta is the probability being in the money by 1 penny or more. On the flip side, okay, if you have a 20% chance of being in the money, it roughly gives you an 80% chance of being out of the money. But then what's the probability of touching? Well, the probability of touching is roughly double the delta. So if you have an option like right here, and that option has roughly a 21 delta, there's about a 42% chance it's going to touch or exceed this particular level, which is 18.5, anytime between now and 27 days from now. Hopefully these concepts will help out some of you guys. Really enjoy the holidays. Again, I wanted to throw something a little different at you as we're in a slower holiday week. Hey, listen, TheoTrade, we never stop. Okay, so the market's going to stop. They slow down. Don't worry. We'll talk concepts. We'll talk trade logic. Stay tuned. There's a lot more to come this next week here. So thanks everybody for joining us here at TheoTrade. Have a wonderful holiday, and we'll be back on broadcasting live all throughout the course of next week. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.